What's up, you guys, and welcome back to the Televised podcast. My name is Anna, and today we're going to be talking about Batwoman Season 2, Episode 2, called Prior Criminal History. I thought this episode was really, really good. It was way full, just packed of stuff happening. It definitely is interesting because, a lot of the times at the beginnings of seasons there's kind of some filler episodes here and there, but it really doesn't feel like that's happening for this season of Batwoman. But really it's because they had so much work to do. They have a lot of heavy lifting to do at the front end of this season, and that's a really interesting, I think, place to be put in for the writers. But I think that they've been doing a really good job so far, especially when you think about not only did they have to come up with how they're going to continue their story after they got cut off last year, because of COVID, they couldn't finish filming, but also, they have this new hero, and it's a difficult balance to strike where, you have people who still love Kate Kane and want Kate Kane back, and people who are warming up to Ryan and people who love Ryan. And it's a really interesting balance to strike. And I think this episode does that really, really well. But yeah, so we're going to talk about this episode, and let's just get into it, I guess. I don't have anything else to say. So we start off this episode with Alice. She is hanging on. She's still hanging on to Mouse's corpse. And you know what? That is so terrible. And but you know what? I mean, my wishes came true. She's not gonna hang on to him for very long because she ends up feeding him to a horde of bats, which is just nasty. That is disgusting. That is horrible. Oh my God. We see her kind of she duct tapes a rat to Mouse's corpse, and then watches as the bats eat him. And that is horrible. It was so terrible, and it's such an interesting switch for Alice, to not only kill her brother, this person that she found so much comfort and solace in, but to then feed him to the bats, to mutilate his already dead body. Isn't that overkill, Alice? But obviously later we kind of find out her ulterior motives about everything, which is really interesting, and I think it's a really interesting plan that she had. Okay, so then we see this scene that I thought was really, really cool. I loved this moment. And it was Kate as Batwoman. Okay, it's a flashback. It's a flashback to Halloween or something. It is Halloween, but I don't remember how long ago they said it was. Just probably last Halloween is what we're supposed to assume. And Ryan is out. She's got these little cat ears on. She's got her cute little simple Halloween costume on. She's walking presumably home from somewhere. We don't know where. And these guys come up to her and they jump her and they try to take her money. And she's like, well, guess what? I don't have any money. The court collection has been asking me the same thing. Where's your money? And she says that she doesn't have an ATM card. She's like, I'm broke. I'm the last person that you want to rob. So then they proceed to beat her, or at least kind of attempt to. Very quickly, Batwoman drops from the sky and saves Ryan. And I thought that was such a cool moment because so not only did we have Ryan last episode learning about Kate herself and finding out that Kate herself was a hero as much as Batwoman was, we also find out that she was one of the people who Batwoman saved. She personally saw how impactful Batwoman was and how she inspired so much hope in the city and all of that. And it was such a cool moment because it was just another link to tie these people together that I think helps the audience to realistically believe that this torch can be passed to Ryan, you know? And so then Jacob and Sophie bring in Luke and Mary, because obviously both of them found out towards the end of the first episode that Kate Kane was actually Batwoman, and both of them were in the dark, and both of them are like, you know what? Mary and Luke, you guys were closest to Kate. Tell me, why did you keep this a secret? You know, how long did you know that she was Batwoman? Like, all of this stuff they're just like railing on them. Jacob is being pretty mean to Mary, and Mary's like, what is your problem? Like, Dad, what is going on? Like, Kate wasn't close to me literally ever. Like, I begged her to let me be her sister, and she wouldn't. Like, and it's nice because as the audience, obviously we know that they had this really good relationship by the time Kate goes missing, but Jacob doesn't know that. And Jacob doesn't need to know that. And it's a really fun kind of moment of irony where you see that like Mary's having to play dumb, and Luke gets like really sassy with Sophie. And Luke goes like straight for the throat, basically is like, listen, buddy, you know, are you just mad that you were in love with Kate and she didn't tell you about this? Like, you weren't important enough, you know, to be told, to be in the loop? Like, I don't know. It was a really interesting moment for Luke, and it's interesting to see kind of this not necessarily new side of him, because he's always been like with Kate, he was always kind of like grumpy. But in this new dynamic with not only with Sophie, where it's like Team Bat against the Crows again, you know, Team Bat 2.0 against the Crows. But also later in the episode, we see it with Ryan, where he's like, listen, buddy, I don't like what you're doing. I don't like this. Kate is Batwoman. You know, it's a really interesting dynamic that he has kind of fallen into. And we see, you know, unfortunately, more of the downfall of Pennymoor. There's a really depressing scene for them at the end of the episode, which made me really sad. And it was funny because I saw a tweet, I can't remember who posted it, but I saw a tweet that was like, Batwoman is just gonna have all of these like gorgeous gay women on here and none of them are gonna kiss each other. Like, and that's what it feels like, because really, like, Pennymoor was our last hope for like some content. until like more relationships can build, because obviously Ryan is so new that it's like, oh my god, you know, who is she gonna kiss? I don't know. Okay, so then Ryan unfortunately gets herself in this situation where she's at the drugstore. She wants to buy Advil because her kryptonite wound hurts like a bitch, and I'm like, girl, I don't think that Advil is gonna like stop the pain of a alien substance coursing through your veins. And one thing that's really interesting too is that somebody pointed out that apparently kryptonite doesn't affect humans. And so there's kind of like two options for this. Is either that it's synthetic kryptonite, which would be interesting because Kara gave that to Kate, and if she didn't know that it was synthetic kryptonite, you know, definitely would be like some questions there about where she got it, or, you know, where it came from. Because synthetic kryptonite does affect humans, as we saw with Metallo. Like, yes, he did have it like literally implanted in his chest, but it's like it was affecting him nonetheless. Like, he was personally being affected by it, physically also being affected by it. Or that Ryan is an alien, which this is just me. I don't know. Let me know if you think and feel differently about this. But for me, I really wouldn't want Ryan to be an alien. Just because, and honestly, as this season itself is showing, the the best part of Batwoman, and I mean Batman and all of these other like bat characters, the best part of them is that they're regular people just trying to do good, and they don't have any powers. The only power that they have is the suit on their backs and the crazy like, contraptions that are paid for by their exorbitant amounts of money. And even now we have Ryan, who's just like kind of reaping the benefits of Kate Kane's money, who was reaping the benefits of Bruce Wayne's money. And so she's not even rich at this point. She's just like this really good person trying to help her city out of the goodness of her heart, and also with the knowledge and with the foresight to think about the little people of Gotham and the most disenfranchised people of Gotham, which is really, really cool. So I don't know. I just think that her being an alien it wouldn't necessarily like knock that down a peg, because it's obviously still so important, but I don't know. I just don't want to see it happen. I think that her humanity and the fact that she is human and she has no powers is what's so important to not only Ryan, but also just anyone who puts on the bat suit. You know what I mean? I mean, obviously, I love Kara because of her humanity and because she chooses to use her powers as an alien for good. But it's nice to like see somebody who doesn't have any powers choose to put themselves on the line in order to help people. You know what I mean? It's kind of like Green Arrow. He always chose to put himself at risk, even though he doesn't have any powers. Always went up against the craziest, shit in the world, fighting with people who do have powers, people who can run really fast, people who can shoot lasers out of their eyes and fly. And also like Sarah, like, White Canary, she doesn't have any powers either. And she didn't used to. But it's that cool dynamic of the destiny not necessarily being chosen for you. You know what I mean? Because like Kara, it was always inevitable that she would use her powers for good. But with like Ryan, she doesn't have those powers to lean back on. And I would appreciate it if she stayed that way. But again, I mean, that's not to say that I would be like so angry if she suddenly was an alien, or if she suddenly had powers or whatever. I don't know. There's just like an interesting conversation, I think, to be had about that, and wondering what is going on with Ryan, especially, with this kryptonite and everything. But definitely, if you have any thoughts about that, let me know. If you think that Ryan, as, Ryan being an alien would be not something you would be so opposed to, I don't know. So anyway, so she's at this drugstore. She is there trying to buy Advil, and this guy comes in and he's trying to commit an armed robbery, and Ryan ends up taking down the robber, and the cashier, I think he did shoot the cashier, and Ryan like went over and like helped him and whatever. But then the crows show up. Of course, the bad guy got away, like the robber, the actual guy who was robbing the store, he got away, and the crows arrest Ryan. And so we get this really, really awesome interrogation moment where it's Ryan and Sophie, and there's so much tension between the two of them. Definitely a potential enemies to lovers arc there, because Sophie, has apparently brought in Ryan many times before. Ryan says that Sophie has brought her in for so many things that she didn't do, and she's like, listen, like, I didn't do anything. I was just helping, and I saved that guy, actually. And Sophie's like, oh, so you're just gonna be a good Samaritan now, huh? And they kind of like go back and forth, and it's really tense. Like, you can definitely feel the hatred and the animosity, and it's an interesting dynamic that they have already, because obviously, like in the last season with Kate and Sophie always liked Kate. And I mean, Sophie kind of had a soft spot for Batwoman, but now we're going to see a Batwoman, kind of Crows/Sophie dynamic where Sophie doesn't like the person under the suit, but she was definitely intrigued to see that new Batwoman in the plaza, which is really interesting. So we find, then we get the corpse of Mouse delivered directly to Mary, and Ryan just happened to be there, and they were having this moment where they were kind of bonding over the fact that their moms were killed by Alice, and also Sophie fully slipped up, and and that was such a funny moment because so Ryan was like, listen, you don't think I know why Jacob won't just murder Alice? And Sophie's like, listen, any sympathy that he had for her is gone now, okay? And Ryan's like, what are you talking about? And Sophie's like, wait, what are you talking about? And Ryan is like, about the fact that if Alice wasn't white, she would be in the sewer, she would be dead, she'd be 6 feet under. And Sophie's like, yeah. And that's when Ryan shows up to talk to Mary about the fact that she put together the pieces that Alice was Beth and was then turned into Alice. And it's just really funny that Ryan has been able to put all this stuff together so quickly. And it might seem like, oh God, like how is she able to put all this stuff together? But really, when you think about it, everyone on Batwoman is a terrible keeper of secrets. They're all so terrible at it, and it's all very closely connected by, one single person. So as soon as she put the pieces together that Kay Kane was Batwoman, all of everything else just started to fall into place. So anyway, Mouse's corpse shows up at Mary's little underground hospital, and they're like, okay, this guy looks really rough, can't believe that Mouse is dead. And they find out that he was killed by the same poison that killed Mary's mom. So it was Alice that in fact poisoned him. And Luke is like, oh shit he was the last thing, kind of tying her to her humanity in that moment. And now he's gone, so that doesn't bode well for Gotham. And they see that he's covered in all of these bat bites, because obviously we as the audience know that he was fully attacked by bats. But then all of a sudden, a bat fully flies out of his chest because it was in there. Gross. And Ryan is screaming, and she's like, I really hate bats, which is so funny coming from Batwoman. But they're like, oh shit, this is a lot. There was a bat inside of there. It was buried inside of Alice's brother, whom she killed. So then after this, they kind of put the pieces together that, because Alice actually confronts Julia in her car and holds a knife to her throat and threatens her and is like, hey, so Sophia killed Kate. How about we work together to take Sophia down, because I know that you're on her hit list too. And Julia seems not necessarily surprised, but I think maybe a little, maybe not relieved either, but definitely intrigued having her suspicions confirmed about the fact that Sophia was the one who did in fact take down Kate's plane, even though she's like, you know what, a plane crash is not her MO, which, I don't know, maybe Sophia's just taking credit for what happened to Kate. Maybe she didn't actually kill her. That would be really interesting if it really wasn't Sophia who took the plane down. Maybe it was someone else that Kate had, ties to, or I don't know, whatever. But so Julia decides, okay, I am not gonna work with you. Even though that would be kind of iconic if they did work together. It would be kind of iconic. She's like, listen, you're crazy, I'm not gonna work with you. And Alice was like, okay, well, at least I don't have a knife in my ribs. And then she stabs Julia and leaves. Oh my God, Alice is so funny and so crazy. I mean, poor Julia, but I mean, she's, like Luke said, she's gonna live. Uh, but anyway, so they get this information from Julia, who says that Alice is planning something really big with a lot of lives gone and a big body count. And they're like, oh shit, like what could it possibly be? And on the TV in Mary's little hospital, they see that there is a Batwoman rally, like to show that their love for Batwoman, because she hasn't shown up for a couple days. And they're like, oh my God, she's gonna blow up that, or they don't know what she's gonna do, but she's gonna do something to that Bat protest, because there's so many people there and it's such a public event. And Mary's like, okay, well, we got to do something. And Ryan's like, well, we need to give them Batwoman. We need to give them Batwoman so that Batwoman can tell them to go home. And Mary's like, yeah, you were great in the suit last time. Let's go. And Luke is like, oh, wait a damn minute. He's like, wait a minute. And he says... He says one of the funniest lines ever, because Ryan's like, listen, I was good in the suit, whatever. And he's like, hello, black? Like, and then Mary says, I think she knows that. And that is so funny, because obviously it's such an obvious difference between the, Kate and Ryan. But one that Ryan is like, listen, if I stand far away enough, nobody will tell that I am in fact black and not also Kate. So Luke is like, I mean, okay, fine. Just, let's go, hurry up. And he's very, very, very not on board with all of this. Mary is like Ryan's number one fan, but Luke is not. He's her number one hater. And it's so funny because Ryan is super duper clumsy in the suit. I kind of love to see it. I think it's really adorable. She, obviously is just trying. She's just trying to, be the hero and do kind of what she, almost like she's emulating what Kate did when she saved her that night. But obviously it's a lot harder than it looks, and it's hard to get used to the suit. And Luke is even like, hey, you need to use the cape, you need to do this, you need to do that. And Mary was also kind of coaching Ryan. She's like, okay, don't put your hands on your hips, that's too much. It's too much. A little Supergirl shade here, I guess, but it's too much. And just, I don't know, look look confident, look powerful. And then, so Ryan is like yelling to these people. She's like, you need to leave right now. Something terrible is going to happen. Yes, I am Batwoman. Something terrible is going to happen. Please flee. Please flee. And Jacob actually gets out these like crazy tactical binoculars, looks at Ryan, and is like, that's not my daughter. That is not my daughter. He said, hello? That is not my daughter. And he's like, well, first he was like, oh my God, Kate, you're back. Oh my God, she's alive. And he takes one look at her and he's like, oh, no, it's not Kate. And he basically is like, okay, time to shoot this bitch out of the sky. And I don't understand why he hates Batwoman so much. Like, I get it. I mean, but I don't. I don't get it. And I hate that he is like that. Anyway. So Alice then shows up, because obviously they were right, and Alice was gonna do something to this event. And Alice shows up, and she obviously knows that this is not Kate either, because she knows, or at least she believes, that Sophia fully killed Kate, and there's no coming back from that. So she shows up on this roof, and they actually end up brawling. It's a really sick fight scene because Alice is in one of her classic, like, long trench coats. It's like a light gray, and she's got her like almost white hair, and then contrasted against Batwoman's black suit and just like that hint of red kind of just like throwing around. It was a really awesome fight scene. Just in the contrast of it all, in the way that it looked. It was really pretty, and it was such a fun fight scene. between the two of them, and they were pretty equally matched. I think that Alice was pretty impressed by how scrappy Ryan was and how she could like pull this fight together. And how she could, she definitely had like an upper hand on her at some points. But then Alice pulls out this little thing, and it's like a honing thing. I don't know, it makes noise. And all of these bats, these feral bats, come flying into the plaza. And Ryan is like, what the hell? And it's the same bats who fed on, it sounds gross, who fed on Mouse's dead corpse with the poison in it. So Alice's whole plan was to infect these bats with the poison that she poisoned Mouse with, and then have the bats fly around, bite everybody at the bat protest, or at the bat support gathering, and then obviously there's no cure, so all these people are infected and there's no cure, and it's madness. And that was her huge plan this whole time. But during the fight scene, though, I forgot to mention, because this is actually really important, Ryan decides that she's like, you know what, I'm gonna do what Kate couldn't, I'm gonna kill Alice right now. And Luke is like, whoa, Batwoman doesn't kill. And the entire audience is like, but she did kill, and she buried a body with Alice. So Ryan is like, listen, I don't care if Batwoman doesn't kill, this bitch killed my mom, I'm gonna get my revenge right now. And Mary is kind of like, listen, why don't we just let her kill Alice? It would be kind of iconic. Because obviously they have this such strong connection between the fact that Alice was kind of almost responsible for killing both of their moms. Obviously directly in Mary's case, and kind of indirectly in Ryan's case, because her lackeys were the ones who ended up killing Ryan's mom. But so they share this like kinship over this hatred of Alice, and Mary's kind of like, listen, why don't we just let Ryan kill Alice? You can tell that all of the pent up anger at Kate was kind of coming out, because she was fighting with Luke, and she's like, listen, I'm sick of pretending that Alice didn't kill my mom and make me hold her in my arms as she died. I'm sick of everyone expecting me to move on because she's Kate's sister. And that was such a cool moment for Mary, because she kind of finally stood up for herself in that moment, because obviously, she was keeping all of those emotions ever since that happened, that, that Alice killed her mom, because she, Kate would always put Alice before Mary, and all of this anger is coming out because she never really got to settle that with Kate, and now she's gone, and she's got to take it out on Luke, and she's got to kind of encourage this new Batwoman to take this justice into her own hands for her mom and for also Ryan's mom. It's a really interesting thing, and Luke is like, listen, but Batwoman doesn't kill. Are you gonna put Kate's legacy on the line just to get your revenge? And that's an interesting point too, because it's like, how would the city react if they saw Batwoman beat Alice to death? It's an interesting, it was an interesting fight, because you can understand and sympathize with both sides of that argument. And I don't know, I really enjoyed that scene, because I just thought it was a really cool character moment for both of them. And then, so then Ryan is forced to choose between the people who are currently being hoarded by bats and her vendetta against Alice. And this was a hero-making moment, because she followed Alice into the stairwell, and Luke was in her ears yelling, listen, you need to go save the people right now. There are people out there being attacked by bats. You need to go save them right now. But Alice was in the stairwell, and she kind of like waved at her, or, like smirked at her. And Ryan is like, damn it, and then she like leaves and goes to save the people. And that was such a hero making moment because she put her own personal vendetta below the people of Gotham, and that is a hero making moment to me. Like that was a really special moment in Ryan's kind of development from person who is seeking revenge to full-fledged hero of Gotham. And so then, after this all happens, Mary goes to her clinic because she knows that these people are going to need help. Like, this is not good. And so she goes to her clinic, and guess who's there? Alice, because she's always there. Whenever everybody doesn't want her there, she's always there. And she offers Mary her own blood. Because really, I think it's Alice's blood and Mary's blood is the only cure for this poison that these people are, being infected with. And Mary's like, listen, I don't believe that you could possibly be trying to actually help me right now. I do not trust you as far as I can throw you, And Alice also calls Mary Steppy, which was really funny. But then, one of my favorite moments of the entire episode was Mary calling Alice out. And that was so good. And Mary had such a great episode this episode, because she just she's finally stood up, to Luke and said, hey, look, who cares about the legacy of the bat? Like, this bitch killed my mom. And she's been such a champion for Ryan. And then in this moment where she says to Alice, she's like, hey, you know what? I don't think that this is about any crazy scheme that you've got going on. I think that I'm your only family you have left, and you don't want to lose that. And you're hurting over Kate, and I'm your sister too. And I think that's so true, obviously, because, like I talked about in the last week's recap, that I don't think Alice would have ever killed Kate. So she's definitely reeling from all of this. And I think, Mary is the only sister she has left. And it was a really cool moment between the two of them, though, to see Mary call her out and say, look, I think that you're more fragile than you're letting on. And I see right through you, So then Ryan has the beacon thing that Alice used, or she finds it, the thing that's making noise to call the bats. So she finds that, and she's like, okay, listen, I'm gonna find a place to put this so that we can blow these bats up, because this has to stop. We can't just let them fly around Gotham for forever. And Luke is like, okay, well, where are we gonna put them? How about this subway? How about this abandoned subway? And Ryan's like, no, that's a homeless, encampment. Like, homeless people live there. We cannot put the bats there, bro. And Luke is like, oh, okay, come on. Let's find somewhere else then. And I thought that was such a special moment, because obviously that's something that Kate would never have known. She wouldn't have known that. She wouldn't have known that homeless people live in that part of Gotham, in that abandoned subway area. And that was so cool, because that was a moment of Ryan standing up for the people of Gotham, who Kate didn't ignore on purpose, but just by sheer circumstance, I guess you could say, never would have known that information, and probably would have sent those bats down there to those people, and they would have been a huge problem later, having killed all of those people. So definitely was really interesting. But Ryan finds a Crow's prison bus meant to round up all the people at the Batwoman riot and take them to prison. And it's empty. So she's like, you know what? This is great. So she gets out of the Batmobile and she's like, get off the bus now. And she's holding a gun and she pulls out a gun and the guy's like, no. And she's like, please. And he's like, oh my God, crazy lady, what is your problem? And so she takes the sound thing and makes sure that the bats are coming and opens the door, and she locks them all in there and blows up the bus. And in the meantime, there's actually this woman on the street who Ryan like shields from this blast, and she's like, the woman's like, Batwoman? And Ryan's like, no, I'm not really Batwoman. And she's like, well, you are to me. And that was such a cool moment too, because it's like, oh my God, you know, the city, it shows that the city needs Batwoman no matter who she is or what she looks like or where she comes from, and that the city will recognize Batwoman as more than the person behind the mask, as just a hero and a symbol, which is really, really cool. So we have this little scene where Mary ends up giving her blood to Hamilton Dynamics to synthesize it and create this antidote. And on the television, they don't give her any credit. And she's like, well, it would have been nice if they just like, you know, gave me a little shout out. I mean, come on. But so then Sophie's actually there at the clinic, and she's like, listen, I don't think that was it. You know, I don't think Alice is done. I think that was too easy. And Mary's like, you know what? Me too. Me too. And there's also this really sad scene. This is the scene that I was talking about earlier, where between Julia and Sophie, where they're kind of talking, and Julia's definitely still feeling that knife in her ribs. And Sophie doesn't seem to bat an eye at it, which is really sad. And Julia asks her, she's like, listen. Well, first of all, actually, Sophie asks her if she knows who the new Batwoman is. And Julia says no. And she's like, but I don't think you'd believe me unless I gave you a name. And she's like, yeah, pretty much. And Sophie kind of starts to walk away. And Julia's like, listen. Did we break up because you're still in love with Kate, or because you can't trust me? And Sophie basically tells her that it was both. And it's so sad. It's so sad. So at the end of this episode, the end of the episode was really, really good. Ryan is in the Batcave with Luke and Mary, and she's like, look, I want to be Batwoman, period. I want to be Batwoman, and the city needs Batwoman. And Luke is like, Kate Kane is Batwoman. And she's like, well, I can be Batwoman for right now, okay? And Mary is like, listen, she was good, Luke. Like, she was really good, and I think we should give her a chance. And Luke is like, all right, fine, but, you know, you're going to listen to me. And you're gonna, you know, we're gonna work together as a team on this, okay? And so while she's kind of, not lurking, but she's like looking around, Ryan is looking around the Batcave, and she's kind of, you know, just like looking at the suit, looking at the computers, you know, looking at everything. Luke and Mary are gone, and she finds this book, this big journal kind of thing. And it was the journal that Kate was writing letters to Bruce in. And she finds this letter to Bruce where she says that tonight, Halloween, she saved this woman, and she saw parts of herself within this woman, this like hope in her. And it was such a cool moment. It was such a sweet moment, because it was like, you know, they acknowledged each other when they didn't even know that their paths would be this intertwined, and how Ryan made a difference in Kate's night that night, you know, made her feel hopeful and made her happy to have been Batwoman that night, and had even felt it was important enough to write it down and, you know, tell it to Bruce. So then Ryan sits down with the book, and she writes, "Dear Kate." And that was like chills, because it's like the legacy of the Bat, you know, so far has been Bruce is Batman, is the city's symbol, disappears, leaves everybody, hanging, and leaves everybody kind of torn about what is happening. Kate picks up the mantle. She writes letters to Bruce. She takes, on this horrible, not horrible, but this role that is extremely difficult to fulfill. Then she disappears, and then the city is left again without a bat. And then Ryan picks up the mantle, and then now she's writing letters to Kate. And it's really interesting because it shows the overwhelming weight of this role, because they've gone through so many bats in, a short amount of time. And it's definitely, really, really interesting to watch and to see. I really am intrigued by how the show is going to handle this. And if Ryan can make it past her year as Batwoman, I think that's definitely a question that we should all be kind of thinking in the back of our minds, because it seems like a gig that eats people alive. But I think she'll be around for a long time, but it's definitely, it's just a kind of a question that the show itself is almost posing, So then at the very end of the episode, Sophie meets up with Alice, and she tracks Alice down to a specific place, and they kind of come face to face. And then Sophie gets herself knocked out by this henchman for Sophia. And this henchwoman tells Alice that Sophia didn't like her little stunt, and it definitely caught her attention. And Alice was like, good, mission accomplished. So it turns out that Alice's plan this whole entire time was to just cause a scene and get Sophia's attention, to make her mad, to make her, kind of reach out for Alice. Because Alice doesn't know where Sophia is, presumably. And yeah. It's just a really interesting end to the episode, with Alice getting knocked out as well. And then next week, we're going to see them finally meet Sophia, and they're going to wind up on the beach, which is really interesting. And also, I just want to mention this, Rachel Scarston had posted this picture where it was her in a brunette wig, so that means she was Beth at the time, probably post burning that lady alive. Post that, but also pre-Alice, and I have a feeling that the storyline from the comics, because in the comics, there's this storyline where Kate is the one who washes up on the beach and kind of like gets together with Sophia. They like become lovers, and she joins her cult and stuff, and then it turns out that Sophia is this like really dangerous woman and all of this stuff. I don't really remember exactly how it goes down. I briefly looked it up when we found out Sophia was going to be a major player, in the second season. But I have a feeling that they kind of switched Kate's storyline from the comics and gave it to Alice, where Beth is potentially the one who washes up on the beach and maybe is lovers with Sophia. That would be really interesting. I'd be really intrigued to see that. And I would love that so much. We can just have our token straights, Mary and Luke, and everyone else could be gay. It would be iconic. But yeah, so that's all I have for this week. Like I said, I really enjoyed this episode. I thought it was really action-packed, and it was really just, like I said, they've done a really good job of honoring Kate's legacy while simultaneously making room for Ryan as this new hero, and not dissing Kate in any way, and also, each character's response to Ryan kind of can emulate that of an audience member, like Luke, could be someone who is more apprehensive of this new character and is definitely taking longer to warm up to them. And Mary is like an audience member who, feels like is in love with Ryan already and is ready to see her do what she needs to do. And also, like, Alice is audience members who fully believe that Kate is dead. And Jacob is maybe audience members who fully believe that Kate is still out there somewhere. And it's really interesting. I think that there's, something for everybody on this show for sure, and a point of view for everybody on this show as well, like however you want to, wherever you want to theorize at this point about where the show is going. So I definitely enjoyed it. Thought it was awesome. Definitely such a fun episode. Great second episode. A lot of the time, like I said, these end up being kind of like filler episodes, and definitely that's not happening here, which is really, really cool. So I'm thrilled to death about that. Felt like last season with all my Supergirl recaps, I was like, this was a filler episode. Anyway. Anyway, yeah, so that's all I have. Let me know what you thought of this episode. If you're watching on YouTube, you can leave me a comment in the comments below, or you can tweet me at TelevisedPod. Let me know what you think. You can like, share, rate, subscribe, leave a review, do all of those things, and I will see you guys next week.